Welcome back, everyone. Mike McConville, Stratford, Ontario, Canada for String Tech Workstations. I've been meaning to put this video together the last few months. I've just been tied up with so many other things. But this is aimed specifically at the last few dozen TechDeck guys that now have their workstations pick them up during this pandemic. So I wanted to show you two case scenarios of how you can load up your TechDeck, whether you're on tour or you're just a home guitar enthusiast. One of the latest guys, John from Riverdale, New York, had asked me, what files do you use to sort of clean up the nut shelf when you're changing a nut? So I'm going to go through that, but I'm also going to go through a lot more than that. This GPS unit that you see in the foreground, I want to bring in and show you underneath the platform. So you can see as I lift this platform up, I have all the pieces of the fretting kit are installed underneath the body platform. I have a dowel for that hole pushed into the high density foam so I can index that straight edge and then just lay it down underneath the body platform. Let me move this out of the way for a second. I've got my tang cutters here, my vernier calipers, the fret leveling file, inspection mirror, and then the 5 sanding blocks that you've seen me use in all the videos. And these are the 6 straight edges that you see me use. Over here, these super small bits are used for things like installing machine heads, the holes for the screws on the machine heads. And I've got a metal burr, 1/4 inch metal round head burr, or small Phillips screwdriver. So you can see how much storage we've got underneath the body platform. It's tucked away so it doesn't get in the way when I'm working. It's there, ready to snap up. I've got a few of these sanding sticks, leather-covered, basically leather-covered tongue depressors, used for sanding all kinds of things. So let's look at the rest of the unit. Here's the view of the front trough. Now, these are all the different Allen keys. There's a Strat Allen key that you need for adjusting necks. And of course, I've got, my Gibson wrench here and my Paul Reed Smith wrench and guild wrench and all the different socket wrenches that I'm going to use for adjusting truss rods. I also have my Hosco files. This is a T-handled Allen key that I cut the one side off, and it allows me to reach in. For some of the guitars, like some of the Martins now, you need a long Allen key to get in and get at the truss rod to adjust it. There's our auger file that we use for cleaning off the burrs on the underside of the crown when we're doing our fretting. I've got my little turbo winder here. And I always keep a couple of small dry brushes handy for glue or touching up. Let's go to the other side. So on this side I have a little container here where I keep a selection of feeler gauges that I use during the compensated nut process. I always keep one of those flip open knives handy. And I have my little scalpel that I use from time to time. You've seen that in the videos as well. What I have here is lithium grease in a syringe, and that's used to lubricate various things at different times. I've got a capo handy here. And over here I've got my little stubby screwdrivers, a straight slot and a Phillips. And in the trough at this end I've got all the typical mini Allen keys that are used for adjusting bridge saddle strats and tellies, and even the Floyd Rose or locking trems. These Allen keys pretty well got you covered, because when I'm working here, working on a bridge, they're completely accessible for when I need them. As you can see, this GPS unit is actually dropped into a regulation style flight case, and based on the feedback that I get from all the touring techs, Thomas Nordic, Steve Weisguy, all the guys that have been on tour with the big bands, I've kind of set this TechDeck up with them in mind. So let me just move this PRS. So let's have a look under this platform. So based on the type of feedback we've gotten from Thomas and TJ and Lance from Tour Supply, I've got these snapshot containers that are loaded up with, the typical stuff, nuts and washers and strap buttons and sort of bits and pieces that come in handy when you're on tour. This is just a selection of screws. And in this container I've got, sort of Strat knobs and Gibson 3-ways and 5-way fender switches, etc., knobs and potentiometers, 500 and 250K. And again, this is kind of aimed at the guys that are out there working on the fly on tour. And here we've got a selection of pickup adjustment screws, 2 different diameters for the Gibson style pickups, humbucker pickups, and a couple of spare jack plates, even a couple of truss rod nuts. And realistically, you get 100 techs, you're going to get 100 different opinions. In this box here, I've got a fender cloth wire, some heat shrink, pickup springs, input jacks. So this is a similar setup to the other unit we were just looking at. I've got my Hosco file. That is a small file that I ground off the teeth on both edges. So it's small enough that I can go onto the flat of a nut slot and level it out. I always have a couple of those. I always have a couple of very thin round files as well for a multitude of things. Again, one of those extra long Allen keys. In this case, it's for the Breedlove guitars. And this is a mini screwdriver. We've got Phillips on one side, straight on the other. And a couple more stubby screwdrivers. One Phillips, one straight. So again, this is the must-have stuff. We've got the Gibson wrench. We've got the PRS wrench. And all the most common Allen keys you're going to use for adjusting truss rods, because quite frankly, when you're on the road, you're not likely to be pulling out frets and leveling fingerboards. I mean, that was a tip from Lance from Tour Supply just before he went on tour with Alabama. This is a couple of years ago. There's my Hosco nut crowning file, because a lot of the time you may do a light spot dress or maybe even replace one fret. But from what I gathered from all of these guys that are on tour, for the most part, you're working on the fly. You're doing sort of basic truss rod adjustments, setup, intonation, action, maybe swapping out an input jack, swapping out a dud pot, that type of thing. And that is sort of one take. I'm sure a lot of you guys will have your own ideas on this thing. This is the kind of touring tech setup. And of course, all of these guys are going to have a multimeter and a soldering iron and some solder. So for the guitar enthusiasts, for the kit building guys, a large percentage of the TechDecks that we've shipped to Germany, Australia, Slovenia, Slovakia, Japan, Newfoundland, California, New York, Texas, Georgia, Washington State, New Brunswick, I can go on and on. Over this last year during this pandemic, a lot of these guys are putting kits together. A large percentage of these guys are just guitar enthusiasts that are working from home, and in many cases they're in lockdown. They're setting up on their dining room tables, and they have their little rolling cart. John from Riverdale, New York, that ordered his unit last week, he said he's got a kind of a rolling cart, which is great because he can kind of wheel it around, take it out when he needs it, and put it away when he doesn't. There's no doubt about it that the portability and the storage capabilities has been a big hit with all the units that have gone out during this pandemic lockdown. I want to close off this video by giving a big shout out to Greg Pigeon, who has overseen the production, shipping, marketing, packaging over this last year. Man, those 100 units went out in a hurry. So thank you, Greg. We all know that this would not be happening without your help. And the other person I need to acknowledge, of course, is Darcy Thompson, who has been very instrumental in overseeing the assembly and packaging of the units and getting them ready for Greg to ship. So for all of the guys who recently came on board with the drill press conversion kit disc sanders, so I just wanted to close this video off with this setup that I use to vacuum up the dust as I'm doing the compensated nuts. They're sanding the foot of the bridge. Just when I'm using this sander, that's how I've got it hooked up. I've got the quick grip clamp, got a hockey puck actually underneath there, and that works wonderfully because I know a lot of you guys are in confined spaces. I know Rob from New Brunswick had mentioned that he was going to kind of hook up a shop vac, which is just fine. Those 5.7 horse shop vacs with a 2-inch diameter hose are more than enough to vacuum up this dust as you work. And that's it for a Sunday afternoon. Cheers, guys.